Hello and welcome to Barbershop Books Story Time with Alvin Irby. That's me. Today's story is another classic. Do you remember what a classic is? Well, it's kind of something that is a little old and that a lot of people like. Well, today's story is called Miss Nelson is Missing. Who's Miss Nelson? Well, let's take a look at the front cover of the story. Well, it looks like a classroom. I see kids or children sitting in rows, and in some classrooms, that's how people sit. I see a desk that looks kind of like maybe a teacher's desk. And this even looks like a chalkboard. So, all those different things make me think that Miss Nelson could be the teacher. And from the title, what does it say? Miss Nelson is missing. Where did Miss Nelson go? I don't know. But there's only one way to find out. We have to hop into the story. The kids in room 207 were misbehaving again. Spitballs stuck to the ceiling. Paper planes whizzed through the air. They were the worst behaved class in the whole school. Man, this class 207 does not sound like they are behaving. And look, you can see paper planes right here. And do you see the spitballs on the ceiling? Ew! That's super gross. One student, he looks like he has a trash can on its head. These students, they are really misbehaving. Now, settle down, said Miss Nelson in a sweet voice. But the class would not settle down. And look, this is their teacher, Miss Nelson, asking them to settle down. And look, students are throwing paper airplanes. I hope you don't throw paper airplanes in your class. Well, I guess if you're learning at home, maybe you could throw a paper airplane at home, but only if you're not it's during the time when you're learning. They whispered and giggled. They squirmed and made faces. Ooh. Wow. These students in Miss Nelson's class, they are really misbehaving. Do you make funny faces in class? I hope not. They were even rude during story time. So that's like they were rude right now. You all aren't being rude out there, are you? Well, look what this student is doing during story time. The student is on their head. That doesn't look safe at all. And they always refuse to do their lessons. These students are misbehaving so much. Something will have to be done, said Miss Nelson. And look, here are the students one student at their desk. And here's Miss Nelson saying to herself that something is going to have to change. Why? Well, because all the students are misbehaving so much. The next morning, Miss Nelson did not come to school. Where was she? Wow, yelled the kids. Now we can really act up. They began to make more spitballs and paper planes. Today, let's just be terrible, they said. Not so fast, hissed an unpleasant voice. I wonder whose voice that is. And look, here are all the students talking about how they are going to act terrible while Miss Nelson is absent or not there. Absent, that's just kind of like a fancy word for someone who, when they're not there. All right, let's find out who said that. A woman in an ugly black dress stood before them. I am your new teacher, Miss Viola Swamp. And she rapped the desk with her ruler. Where is Miss Nelson? Asked the kids. Never mind that, snapped Miss Swamp. Open those arithmetic books. Miss Nelson's kids did as they were told. This Miss Viola Swamp, she doesn't sound nice at all. And look, here she is. She doesn't even look nice at all. I wonder what's going to happen now that they have this new teacher, Miss Viola Swamp. They could see that Miss Swamp was a real witch. What? She meant business. And look, here's a picture of her close up. And look, the students, they look kind of scared. What do you think? Would you like Miss Viola Swamp as your teacher? I don't think I would want her as my teacher. Right away, she put them to work. And she loaded them down with homework. Whoa, that's a lot of homework. Look at all this work they have to do on the board. And then look at this homework. The kids, you can't even see their faces because they're holding so many books. Those books look heavy too. Oh man, this new teacher, Miss Viola Swamp, she really does mean business. We'll have no story hour today, said Miss Swamp. Keep your mouths shut, said Miss Swamp. Sit perfectly still, said Miss Swamp. And if you misbehave, you'll be sorry, said Miss Swamp. Oh, man. Miss Swamp, she doesn't sound nice at all. She's telling the students to do all these different things. They have to be quiet. They have to sit still like a mummy or a statue. Oh, man. The kids in room 207 had never worked so hard. Days went by, and there was no sign of Miss Nelson. The kids missed Miss Nelson. Now, I have a question. Why do you think all of the students missed Miss Nelson? Maybe because she was nice? And she had a sweet voice? And Miss Swamp, well, she seems kind of mean, and she even has a mean voice. So that's why I think that maybe the students miss Miss Nelson. Why do you think the kids miss Miss Nelson? Look at this picture right here. Do you see Miss Viola Swamp pointing at the kids? She's probably telling them to do something. And you can look at the kids' faces and tell how they feel. Look, the kids look scared and sad. You know what? I think I would feel scared and sad if Miss Viola Swamp was my teacher. Man. Maybe we should try to find her, they said. Some of them went to the police. Detective McSmog was assigned to the case. McSmog? Do you know what smog is? It's like smoke that's in the air that's kind of like clouds, kind of. It's just like smoke that stays in the air. And when it's really, really smoggy, it's hard to breathe. It's just, I guess it kind of just means that the air is dirty. And this detective, his name is McSmog. That's funny. He listened to their story. He scratched his chin. He said, I think Miss Nelson is missing. Detective McSmog would not be much help. Why did the students say that Detective McSmog would not be any help? Well, they told him everything that happened, and all he had to say was, Miss Nelson is missing. But the students already knew that, so it's kind of like he wasn't really that much help. And look, here are the students going to the police station. And here is the detective, McSmog. Now, I think I have an idea why they call him Detective McSmog. I think it's because he's smoking on a tobacco pipe. And guess what comes out of this tobacco pipe? Smoke. Remember, smog is like smoke that's in the air. So maybe people call him Detective McSmog because he's always smoking a pipe, and so it's smoky. That's fun. Oh, you know something I just noticed? He has a fun tie on. His tie has a palm tree and I think a beach. That's a cool tie. Let's find out what happened to Miss Nelson. Other kids went to Miss Nelson's house. The shades were tightly drawn and no one answered the door. In fact, the only person they did see was the wicked Miss Viola Swamp coming up the street. If she sees us, she'll give us more homework. They got out of there just in time. So the students went to Miss Nelson's house to try and see what had happened to her, but they didn't find Miss Nelson. They didn't even see her. The only person that the students saw was Miss Viola Swamp coming down the street. And they ran out of there so fast because they were afraid that Miss Swamp would give them homework. And look, here she is coming around the corner with groceries. I wonder why Miss Swamp is walking near Miss Nelson's house. Do you think they know each other? I don't know. Because this story is about a detective, I think I'm going to switch my hat to my detective hat. What do you think? Do you think I should put on my detective hat? I have a hat that looks kind of like this detective hat. Well, because you said yes, I'm going to switch hats. Give me like 5 seconds. Count to 5, and when I get back, I'll be back right here with my detective hat on. Whew, that was fast. Are you ready? Oh, let me show you. Here is my detective hat. And since this is a mystery that needs to be solved, I'm going to put on my detective hat. What do you think? Do you like it? Let's get back to the story. Maybe something terrible happened to Miss Nelson. Maybe she was gobbled up by a shark, said one of the kids. But that didn't seem likely. That just means That probably didn't happen. And look, they even were imagining some sharks. And look, there's someone's feet. And I guess they got gobbled up by a shark. And there's even a sign that says, sharks, very unpleasant. Let's see what else. I wonder what else the students think happened to Miss Nelson. Maybe Miss Nelson went to Mars, said another kid. But that didn't seem likely either. And look, there's even a picture of a spaceship on Mars, and then there's someone in the background. Maybe that's how they imagine Miss Nelson on Mars. Would you like to travel on a spaceship? Oh, you would have to be an astronaut. Would you like to be an astronaut? I actually spoke to a rocket scientist from NASA just the other day. It was so cool. Okay, back to the story. I know, exclaimed one know-it-all. Maybe Miss Nelson's car was carried off by a swarm of angry butterflies. What? But that was the least likely of all. So here are the students trying to guess what they think happened to her. But none of them seem to come up with anything that really seemed like it could happen. Like, do you really think a swarm, like a ton of butterflies could carry off a car? I don't think so. But it is a cool picture. All of these students are using their imaginations to think about what could have happened to Miss Nelson. The kids in room 207 became very discouraged. That means they kind of felt really sad and, I don't know, they weren't happy. It seemed that Miss Nelson was never coming back, and they would be stuck with Miss Viola Swamp forever. Forever. That means forever. She would never, they thought Miss Nelson would never come back. They heard footsteps in the hall. "Here comes the witch," they whispered. "Hello, children," someone said in a sweet voice. A sweet voice? Whose voice do you think that is? It's a sweet voice. I think it's Miss Nelson, because remember, Miss Nelson had a sweet voice. You know, something looks different in the class. Look at the ceiling. Do you notice anything different about the ceiling while Miss Viola Swamp was their teacher? I don't see any spitballs. Not even one. Look. I don't see any paper airplanes. It seems like the class really changed while Miss Viola Swamp was their teacher. Let's see if my guess was correct. Remember, they heard a sweet voice, and I think that the sweet voice is Miss Nelson. Let's find out. It was Miss Nelson. "Did you miss me?" she asked. "We certainly did," cried all the kids. "Where were you?" "That's my little secret," said Miss Nelson. "How about a story hour?" "Oh, yes," cried the kids. Miss Nelson noticed that during story hour, no one was rude or silly. "What brought about this lovely change?" she asked. "That's our little secret," said the kids. And look, here are all the kids surrounding Miss Nelson because they're so happy that she's back. Because why do you think they're so happy that she's back? Because Miss Viola Swamp was the meanest teacher ever. Even her voice was mean. Remember, she would say, "Here's your homework, and sit still and be quiet." Just like that. That does not sound like a nice teacher at all. And look, even all of the students, they're all sitting nicely, behaving like really excellent students. I wonder whatever happened to Viola Swamp. Let's keep reading the story. Back home, Miss Nelson took off her coat and hung it in the closet right next to an ugly black dress. An ugly black dress? Miss Nelson has an ugly black dress in her closet? Wait a minute. But Miss Viola Swamp wore an ugly black dress. This sounds like a case for Detective Irby. I think that maybe, just maybe, Miss Nelson was also Miss Viola Swamp. We'll have to look for some evidence. When it was time for bed, she sang a little song. "I'll never tell, I'll never tell," she said to herself with a smile. And look, if you look closely, you can see the ugly black dress. You can even see black shoes. And I see something in the closet on the top. Can you read it? W-I-G. It's upside down. It says wig. You know what a wig is? It's like fake hair that people put on their head so that they can look different. I think I found the evidence. The black dress, the black shoes, and the wig. I think that Miss Nelson, or let me say it differently. I think that Miss Viola Swamp was really Miss Nelson, and she disguised herself like Miss Viola Swamp. Why? So that the class would stop misbehaving all the time. Well, P.S. Detective McSmog is working on a new case. He is now looking for Miss Viola Swamp. Do you think he's going to find him? Find her? Probably not, because I think Miss Nelson and Miss Viola Swamp are the same person. But who knows? Maybe he's a good detective. And look, here's a picture. We kind of look the same. I have a mustache. He has a mustache. I have a hat with 2 brims. He has a hat with 2 brims. I don't have a feather. I don't have a leaf, though. Well, guess what? That is the end of today's story. Thank you so much for watching Barbershop Books Storytime. If you would like to learn more about Barbershop Books, you can visit our website, barbershopbooks.org, or you can connect with us on social media at Barbershop Books. Until next time, bye.